In this video, I want to talk about the worst thing that you can do when tying on a lure. And there's actually three of them. There's three big mistakes that are so easy to make when you're tying on a lure, and they can cause you a lot of issues and cause you lost fish. But real quick, before we get into the video, this one is brought to you by my apparel company, Finn Fishing. Right now, if you buy a USA made sun shirt, you get a free pair of sun gloves. Again, that's USA made. It's one of the only USA made sun shirts out there on the market. And you get a free pair of gloves with it right now. All you gotta do is add the sun shirt, add the gloves to cart, and it will automatically discount you at checkout. You will save $22. All right, let's get into this video all about basically the worst thing that you can do when tying on a lure. Now, some of these things are pretty basic, but if you haven't heard them, or maybe you're new into fishing, they're very, very important for you to understand. Now, the first thing when tying on a lure, and a lot of these kind of revolve around tying on hard baits for the most part, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. But the first thing is actually tying on a lure that has a split ring. So most of these baits that we have, hard baits, top waters, crankbaits, lipless crankbaits, a lot of them have a split ring that you actually tie your line to. Now, if you guys know what a split ring looks like, there's that little section where the split ring comes together. And in between there, you want to make sure that your knot is never in between where that split ring comes together. That little section where there's just one wire. And it is so easy for us to, when we just tie on a lure, to not even pay attention to that. We just, put our line through the split ring, maybe double it over depending on what knot you're tying on. You tie up your knot, you pull it tight, and you're off with your fishing day. And it's so easy sometimes for that knot to land right where that split ring comes together. And you do not want to do this for actually a number of different reasons. One, if you look at most split rings, kind of where they end on the top and the bottom, it actually is a little point. So that little point can actually dig into your line. It can dig into your knot when you go to catch a fish or land a fish, and it will cause that knot to break under a lot less stress than it would normally break. The other thing is you can actually, I've seen it where you can pull a split ring apart a little bit easier. Now these are crappier split rings, but some of the really inexpensive baits that you buy out there, maybe just the Walmart dollar ones, have some very crappy split rings on. And if you put it right there in the middle, you can actually pull that split ring off. I've done that before when I was really, really young. So you obviously don't want to do that. It can just cause a lot of different issues. Again, it's something very basic, but even for some of the most advanced anglers out there, it's just something that we don't always pay attention to. We might just throw that lure on and just go on with our day. So do not tie where that split ring comes together. Now, the second thing, this one is really, really, really big, and it's something that I've only learned more over the last basically month with me tying 1,000 different knots here in my little shop area, and that is make sure you know how to tie whatever knot that you are tying the right way. This is extremely important because I'm talking about massive percentages that you will lose if you don't know how to tie the right knot. For example, one of the strongest knots out there on the market is a Palomar knot. It's a great knot. It works with braid, it works for fluorocarbon, it works for monofilament. It's a very, very popular knot. Now, have you ever tied a Palomar knot before and you just didn't like the way that it came together? Maybe it is like a little bit more bumpy. It just looks weird. Sometimes there's a weird clicking noise when you pull it together. If that happens to you, cut that knot off. Absolutely. Just cut it off and retie. It only takes a few more seconds because this is something that with my knot test that I did here recently, I did that exact same thing. I tied one of these Palomar knots, very simple knot to tie, but I just didn't like the way that it came together. And I went ahead and decided to test it out to see how it did. And it basically broke at 50% of the overall line strength. I was testing 20-pound line. It broke at 11 pounds. And that was simply because the knot was a bad knot. It was not a good knot. Even with as simple of a knot as a Palomar, you can still mess it up. So the big thing here, anytime you pull a knot together and you're like, yeah, I don't really like that. I know. I've been there too where I'm like, I just want to get to casting. I want to get to fishing, and sometimes I'm like, whatever, it's good enough. I'm telling you, especially if you're a tournament fisherman and money is on the line, but even if you're out there and you're trying to chase trophy fish or you just want to catch every bass that bites, make sure you know how to tie those knots properly. This is uber important. It's also very, very simple and something that can go overlooked. All right, let's talk about the last thing. And this is, again, it's very similar to all these things I've been talking about. They're simple things to do, but sometimes they just slip our mind. And this is when you tie on a bait, no matter what type of bait this is, just run your finger across the hook. Make sure you have good hooks. Make sure you have sharp hooks. And this is especially true if you fish baits that have a single hook, like a jig or a chatter bait or a spinner bait. Because a lot of times with those baits, you're just you kind of just feel like that's the one hooks that I really don't, I usually check my treble hooks a lot. I don't always check my jig hooks. But sometimes what happens with those baits, you get hung into a piece of wood, you hit up against a little bit of a rock, and you will roll that point of the hook over, or you will simply dull. You will make it dull. And it's actually pretty crazy how much more force it is needed to set the hook on a rolled hook into a fish than a very sharp, premium, good hook. So always just run your finger across, make sure that that hook is sticky sharp. If these are treble hooks, this is something that's very, very easily done. Anytime I fish a treble hook bait, I always take my 3 fingers. Don't hook yourself now, because I don't want you to be like, oh, Tyler, I checked and got hooked in 3 fingers. Don't do that. Just make sure that they're sharp. And you can easily replace a treble hook. Now, if you're using a single hook bait, you can go old school and just do a hook sharpener. Like they sell hook sharpeners all the time. I will leave one down below in the description. You can easily sharpen a rolled over or dull hook just at least to use it enough for that day. Maybe you have one of those baits. Maybe it's a chatterbait in a single color and you're like, man, this is the one they're biting. I know, we've all been there. It's something that gives us a lot of confidence. Just sharpen that hook. Spend a few seconds, sharpen that hook. It's good enough. When you get home, order a couple more of those chatterbaits, because it's always best to just have a fresh hook. You know, I can sharpen a hook really well, but I do like the ones that are fresh hooks, never been used. So those are the 3 big mistakes that any angler can make when you tie on a lure, and they can cost you a lot of fish. Now, if you guys enjoy this video, you will probably like my most recent video that I'm gonna leave linked right here. Also, guess what? I will see you tomorrow.